Hello viewers, welcome to Kids Auto and Truck Repair. Today we have a 2011 Chrysler Town and Country with a 3.6 liter. The customer complaint on this vehicle is the engine is leaking oil. There is a huge oil leak under the hood. Actually, the top of the transmission is covered with motor oil. The customer also stated that he's been adding about a quart of motor oil once a week. So they brought the vehicle to us so we can figure out what's causing the oil leak on this engine. Now, this is a pretty common issue on these 3.6 liter engines. If you are a Chrysler specialist, I'm pretty sure you know what the problem is on this engine. Now, I'm gonna bring you here under the hood so I can show you the leak, and then I will tell you what we have to do so we can fix the cause of the leak. So now let's get under the hood and take a look. I'm gonna remove the engine cover first. The engine cover just pops off. We're just gonna lift it up like that. I'm gonna get it out of the way. So now let's check out this leak. So as you can see, we have oil over here on the transmission. So the top of the transmission is actually covered with oil. You see, this is engine oil. See that right there? And we have more oil down here. Look at that. You see? So that's not transmission oil, that's engine oil. Now the question is, where is that oil coming from? Now, if you look at the intake manifold, so this is our intake manifold, and if you look down there, we also have oil under the intake manifold. Okay, look at that. So there's a pool of oil down there. Okay, now look at my pinky finger. My pinky finger is dry, so I'm gonna touch under the intake manifold. Look at that. See this? Okay, so where is this oil coming from? I believe what's happening is there is something under the intake that's leaking, and that oil is being splashed around when the engine is running, and it's actually coming towards the transmission. Okay, so what's causing it? What's causing the leak? There is a oil cooler and a oil filter housing under the intake. Okay, so if you look over here, this is the engine oil filter housing. So this housing is located under the intake manifold. So that housing is leaking. The housing has O-rings on it between the engine block and the oil filter housing itself. So those O-rings are leaking, and that's what's causing oil to leak on top of the transmission. Okay, so we have to remove and replace the oil filter housing and the oil cooler to fix this leak. Okay, so with that being said, I am going to disconnect the battery. Let's disconnect the battery, and then we're going to remove the air filter box. The intake has to come out. Once we get the intake manifold removed, then we're going to get access to the oil filter housing. So now let's do that. I'm going to disconnect this battery terminal first. Because we're going to disconnect some electrical connectors. That's why I'm disconnecting the battery terminal. Just like that. All right, so now let's remove the air filter box. We're gonna start by removing this PCV tube. We're just gonna pull it out, just like that. Then we're gonna pull the other side out also. So here comes our PCV tube. We're gonna get it out of the way. And then the next thing is removing this air inlet tube. We need a flat screwdriver to undo the clamp over here. Now, I just realized that we actually don't need to remove the air filter box. The air filter box can stay in place because everything we're gonna do is on this side of the engine, so the air filter box can stay there. So here comes our inlet tube. We're gonna get it out of the way. So now the next step is disconnecting the throttle body electrical connector, and then we're gonna remove this tube as well. So we're gonna disconnect this tube. We're gonna disconnect this map sensor. So right now what I'm doing is disconnecting pretty much any sensor that's attached to the intake manifold. So now we're going to disconnect the throttle electrical connector. So just like that. And then we can push all these wires out of the way. Okay. And then we're going to disconnect our brake booster hose back here. Just like that. We can push this out of the way. And then we're going to disconnect this hose. Okay, just like that. All right. So now we should now remove this tube over here. Now this tube only has grommets that hold it in place. Now we're gonna remove this tube over here. There is a plastic rivet up here that we have to pull up, just like that. Okay, we're gonna get this out of the way. Now, in the back of this plastic tube, we have two plastic grommets behind it. So we're just gonna have to pop this off. We just need to lift up, just like that. And then this piece is gonna come out. So just like that, it has these two grommets in the back that hold it in place. And there is no clamp around this opening that goes against the throttle body. Okay? So I'm gonna remove this, get it out of the way. Now the next step is getting this upper radiator hose bracket off of the intake. We're just gonna push this out of the way. Just like that. Okay, so now the next step is removing a bracket that's back here. There is a metal bracket over here that we have to undo. I have to undo this 13. There's a 13 millimeter over here and this 10 millimeter. So this 13 millimeter bolt and this 10 millimeter nut, then this bracket is going to be able to just lay down this way. And then we have two nuts over here that we have to undo. This, and there's another one over here. And after that, we're going to remove the intake manifold bolt. Then our intake manifold is going to come out. Our upper intake manifold will come up first. Okay? So now let's do that. Let's remove this bracket first. Okay, so here comes the bracket. We're just gonna push it down here. Now I'm gonna remove these two 10 millimeter nuts. There's one over here. So here comes the first one. We're gonna remove the second one. So that should be everything in terms of brackets. So now we're gonna remove the upper intake manifold bolts. The upper intake manifold bolts are 8mm bolts. So we have one over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's one in this hole, 5, 6. Okay. And then 7 over here. So once we remove all these bolts, our intake manifold is going to come out. Before we remove the intake manifold, I want to show you the bracket that I removed back here. So here's the bracket, and this bracket goes right here. Okay, there's a nut that holds the bracket on the intake manifold. There's a nut here, there's another one over here, and then there's a bolt that goes right over here. Okay, so you have to undo that bolt and these two nuts and then just push the bracket out of the way like that. Okay, so we got the bracket removed. Now we're gonna remove our intake manifold bolts. So we got the first one undone. We're gonna undo this one. All right, so now let's try to lift our intake manifold. So just like that, here comes our intake manifold. Okay, now these bolts are not gonna fall. Okay, so the intake manifold is removed. Okay, we're gonna have to clean this throttle body. All right, so I'm gonna get this out of the way. We're gonna remove this piece of insulation here and just put it out of the way. Now the next step is gonna be disconnecting our fuel line. Now you have to be careful when you disconnect the fuel line, okay? And make sure you are wearing your safety glasses when you disconnect the fuel line. So our fuel line is disconnected from the fuel rail. So now we're gonna disconnect our fuel injectors. After we get the fuel injectors disconnected, then we're gonna remove our lower intake manifold. Just like that. We have to release this red locking piece first. And then disconnect the injector. So we can just fold the wiring like this out of the way. Actually, we could disconnect the coils too if we want. Okay, so we got the coils undone. Now the whole wiring can just be folded back here. We're gonna do the same thing with the wiring back here. All right, so this harness can also be folded back there, just like that. Now, I'm now gonna disconnect the fuel rail from the lower intake manifold. The fuel rail can stay on the lower intake manifold. I'm just gonna undo the bolts for the lower intake manifold. And the lower intake manifold bolts are also 8mm bolts. All right, so all our lower intake manifold bolts have been undone. So our lower intake manifold bolt should come out. Okay, we're gonna get the wiring out of the way. Now I'm gonna lift our lower intake manifold just like that. Here it comes. Okay. So look at this. Now we're gonna replace all these gaskets, okay? All these gaskets will be replaced and we're gonna clean this really well. So we're gonna get our lower intake manifold out of the way. So here is our engine oil cooler. I'm going to block off these orifices over here. We don't want any dirt to fall in the cylinders. Just like that. We're gonna clean off these surfaces before we install our new oil cooler assembly. Now I'm gonna disconnect this engine coolant temperature sensor, just like that. And then we're gonna disconnect our oil pressure sensor down here, just like that. Okay. As you can see, we have a lot of oil down there. Okay. Now, we're gonna remove the bolts that hold the oil filter housing against the block. Now, I want you guys to look around the oil cooler. Look here. You see the oil down there? Okay, so this is what was causing the leak. I don't know if the camera is picking this up very well. So there is a lot of oil down over here. Okay, you see that oil down there? Okay, so there's your problem, lady. So now we're gonna undo this clamp over here so we can disconnect this coolant hose. Okay, so we got the coolant hose disconnected. So here's the clamp. Now we're gonna remove the oil filter housing. We're gonna undo this bolt over here first. And then we're gonna undo this one over here. And then this one. And then this over here. Okay, so we should be good to go. In case you're wondering what size bolts are these, this is a E8. I hope you can see. This is a E8. I don't know if the camera is picking this up, okay? So the housing itself, the oil filter housing has 5 bolts. Okay, so we got all these bolts undone. So now the housing should be able to come out. We're just gonna rock it back and forth like that. Okay, so here it comes. We're gonna lift it just like that. We're gonna put it right over here on this pig mat. Okay, I don't know if you're gonna be able to tell, but these O-rings over here are completely worn out. You see how flat they are? Oh, especially this one is really bad. Even this one is very, very bad. Okay, so luckily we got a new oil filter housing from Chrysler. So we're good to go. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to clean up this surface. I'm gonna clean up these surfaces here. I'm gonna clean up the block valley. When you do this job, you have to drain the oil and change it. We're gonna have to do the oil change on this, okay? So now I'm gonna clean everything off camera. I'm gonna clean up our upper intake manifold and lower intake manifold. I'm gonna clean up these surfaces off camera, and then I'll bring you guys back up so we can install our new engine oil filter housing. I have cleaned these matting surfaces off camera. As you can see, they are cleaned and shining. So everything looks good. So now let's install our new oil cooler. Here is our new oil cooler assembly. Here is the part number from Chrysler. So I'm going to get our oil cooler out of the box. These are the intake manifold gaskets. This is the part number. And then here is our brand new cooler assembly. As you can see, it looks right, nice and shiny. So now let's take this to the vehicle so we can install it.